Japan's southwestern islands are undergoing the most consequential military transformation in the Asia-Pacific since the end of the Cold War. Tokyo has shattered decades of strategic ambiguity with a single irreversible declaration. Prime Minister Sanae Takichi stood before the Japanese parliament and stated plainly that a Taiwan contingency is a Japan contingency. Those 8 words represent a tectonic shift in East Asian security architecture, one that Beijing's military planners never anticipated and cannot easily counter. For decades, Japan's pacifist constitution and carefully maintained diplomatic ambiguity had effectively kept Tokyo out of any realistic Taiwan conflict scenario. China's entire strategic calculus for controlling the strait was built, in part, on that assumption. Now that assumption has been demolished. The operational consequences for any planned Chinese military action against Taiwan are severe, compounding, and potentially decisive. This is not a rhetorical repositioning. Japan has already restructured its command architecture, reoriented its defense budget, begun physically placing weapons systems on islands within visual range of the Taiwanese coastline. The centerpiece of Japan's new posture is Yonaguni Island, a sliver of Japanese territory sitting just 110 kilometers east of Taiwan. On clear days, residents of Yonaguni can see the Taiwanese coastline with the naked eye. Japan's defense ministry has confirmed that Type 03 medium-range surface-to-air guided missile systems will be stationed at Camp Yonaguni during fiscal 2030, with Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi publicly confirming the deployment timeline extends to March 2031. But why does the precise placement of one missile battery on a small island carry such enormous strategic weight? The answer lies in what these systems physically deny any adversary attempting to establish air superiority over the strait. A Type 03 battery on Yonaguni creates an air defense umbrella extending directly into the primary air corridors that Chinese strike aircraft and carrier-based jets would need to transit during any large-scale Taiwan operation. The moment those systems are operational, the airspace above the western approaches to Taiwan becomes contested territory covered by Japanese defensive fire. This represents the culmination of a deliberate and methodical strategy that Japan has been executing for nearly a decade. In 2016, Tokyo installed coastal surveillance equipment on Yonaguni, framing it as a modest and purely observational measure. In 2023, missiles arrived on Ishigaki Island, accompanied by electronic warfare units positioned across the Ryukyu chain. Each individual step appeared incremental and defensively justified. Taken together, they form a comprehensive anti-access architecture stretching across more than 55 islands connecting Japan's main islands to the edge of the Taiwan Strait. Japan has effectively constructed a missile and sensor corridor, a layered defensive spine that any Chinese naval or air operation moving toward Taiwan must either punch through or circumnavigate. Neither option is strategically acceptable for Beijing. The cumulative effect is not a single defensive line, but an interlocking series of overlapping threat envelopes that multiply the operational complexity facing the People's Liberation Army exponentially. Japan's defense white paper now categorizes China explicitly as an unprecedented and greatest strategic challenge, language that would have been politically unthinkable in Tokyo just 5 years ago. This doctrinal shift has been enabled by a fundamental reorientation of Japan's threat assessment. For most of the post-war period, Japan's primary military concern was directed northward, toward Russian forces in Hokkaido and the Kuril Islands. That orientation has reversed entirely. The self-defense forces are now reorganizing their command structures and capability development programs, specifically around the scenario of a Chinese military operation against Taiwan and the cascading spillover effects that would inevitably reach Japanese soil and airspace. Defense spending is being accelerated toward 2% of GDP, a threshold Japan previously treated as politically radioactive. The procurement list reads like a blueprint for denying China naval and air access across the entire southwestern island chain. Tomahawk cruise missiles, hypersonic weapons, long-range anti-ship capabilities, expanded logistics infrastructure to sustain extended operations in the islands. Beijing's response to Japan's declaration has been swift, coordinated, and deliberately multidimensional. China imposed a ban on dual-use technology exports to Japan on January 6th, targeting software, manufacturing technology, Critically, rare earth elements that Japan depends on for producing advanced semiconductors and drone components. China has simultaneously restricted giant panda loans. A symbolic diplomatic instrument Beijing has historically deployed as a signal of friendship or withheld as a form of punishment. Naval vessels are now taking more diverse routes through the Nansei Islands chain. The Japan Joint Staff confirming that Chinese and Russian military ship transits are expanding and intensifying in frequency and operational complexity. Beijing has also unleashed its information warfare apparatus, with the People's Daily publishing an editorial on November 14th under the pseudonym Zhang Sheng, the official mouthpiece for CCP foreign policy, characterizing Takaichi's statement as utterly isolating political nonsense and accusing Japan of seeking a pretext for military expansion. The Beijing Daily went further, explicitly comparing Takaichi's comments to the justifications the Japanese Empire offered before invading Manchuria. None of this pressure has altered Japan's trajectory. Takaichi secured a decisive general election victory following the Beijing backlash. That itself represents a significant data point about the domestic political landscape in Japan. The Chinese economic coercion that succeeded in forcing South Korea into prolonged paralysis over its TAD deployment has produced no equivalent leverage over Tokyo. This failure matters enormously for Beijing's broader coercive toolkit. If economic punishment and diplomatic pressure cannot stop Japan from publicly committing to a Taiwan contingency and physically placing missiles on islands 110 kilometers from Taiwan, then China's gray zone strategy of incremental pressure below the threshold of armed conflict has encountered a constraint it cannot easily resolve. The same playbook that achieved results in Seoul and generated hesitation in Manila is not generating the expected compliance in Tokyo. The military exercise China designated Justice Mission 2025, launched on December 29th by the Eastern Theater Command, revealed the current state of Beijing's operational planning. The exercise involved land, sea, air, rocket forces in a coordinated demonstration centered not on traditional amphibious assault rehearsal, but on blockade and encirclement procedures. The US-based Center for Strategic and International Studies calculated that Taiwan's liquid natural gas reserves would be exhausted in approximately 2 weeks under a total blockade. This is precisely why China's current operational focus has shifted toward a quarantine strategy rather than a direct invasion template. A quarantine framed legally as domestic Coast Guard enforcement action within China's claimed waters rather than a military blockade under international law allows Beijing to apply potentially decisive economic strangulation while maintaining deliberate ambiguity about whether a state of war actually exists. The distinction is not semantic. Under international law, a formal blockade triggers neutrality obligations that force third parties to declare their stance. A quarantine, by contrast, paralyzes Allied decision-making in exactly the moment when speed and clarity matter most. But here is where Japan's new posture directly disrupts the quarantine strategy, in ways that China's planners have not fully resolved. A Japanese military commitment to a Taiwan contingency means that Chinese Coast Guard and naval vessels attempting to enforce an encirclement around Taiwan would be operating within range of Japanese systems based in the Ryukyu chain. The legal and operational ambiguity that makes a quarantine attractive for Beijing begins to collapse when the nation positioned 110 kilometers from Taiwan has publicly declared that a Taiwan contingency is its own contingency and has the missile systems on the ground to enforce that declaration. Japan's Defense Ministry update from June noted that Chinese military vessels are taking more diverse routes through the Nansei Islands chain to reach the Pacific, a pattern that reflects Beijing's awareness of the growing threat those islands represent to any Chinese naval movement in the region. The rare earth export ban deserves particular analytical attention because it reveals a critical vulnerability in China's own coercive logic. By restricting rare earth exports to Japan in response to Takaichi's Taiwan declaration, Beijing simultaneously handed Tokyo a compelling domestic political argument for accelerating exactly the defense industrial investments China most wants to prevent. Rare earth dependency has been a recognized strategic liability for Japan's defense and semiconductor industries for years. Every month that China maintains this export restriction is a month during which Japan's political will to build alternative supply chains and domestic processing capacity strengthens. The Chinese Commerce Ministry's January 6th announcement targeted dual-use items including rare earths applicable to chip and drone manufacturing, the precise categories of capability Japan is trying to expand. The coercive tool and its target are in direct contradiction. Over a sustained period, that contradiction favors Japanese capability development rather than Chinese leverage. Furthermore, the broader allied architecture surrounding Japan's posture change amplifies its strategic impact considerably. Japan is not executing this transformation in isolation. American forces based in Japan are directly integrated into any Taiwan contingency planning. The Japanese command structure reorganization specifically addresses coordination with U.S. Pacific forces. Philippine positioning along Taiwan's southern approaches adds additional geographic depth to the access denial problem Beijing faces. The combination of Japanese missile deployments in the north, American carrier strike groups operating across the Pacific, Philippine basing arrangements to the south means that a Chinese military operation against Taiwan must simultaneously manage threats emanating from multiple independent geographic directions, each backed by a different national command authority with its own escalation thresholds and decision timelines. This multi-vector problem is qualitatively different from anything China's Eastern Theater Command planners faced even 3 years ago. The economic dimensions of Japan's transformation carry their own strategic significance. Japan is accelerating toward 2% of GDP defense spending. Tomahawk cruise missiles are already flowing into Japanese inventories, weapons with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers that can threaten Chinese naval assets and land targets across a vast operational radius from Japanese island positions. Japan is simultaneously developing indigenous hypersonic strike capabilities and long-range anti-ship missiles specifically designed for employment in the confined waters and island corridors of the southwestern chain. Each new weapon system integrated into the self-defense forces adds another targeting problem for Chinese planners attempting to model a Taiwan operation. The cumulative financial and operational weight of these acquisitions is already stressed in China's air defense planning requirements in the region. This was because every Japanese long-range strike system represents a threat that must be suppressed or neutralized before a Taiwan operation could proceed with acceptable risk. The political durability of Japan's shift is perhaps the most consequential element of all for Beijing's long-term calculations. Takaichi's electoral victory following China's backlash demonstrates that the Japanese public has absorbed the strategic logic of Taiwan's security being inseparable from Japan's own security. This public understanding did not exist with the same clarity a decade ago. China's increasingly aggressive gray zone operations around the Senkaku Islands, the intensifying military pressure on Taiwan, the expanding Chinese naval presence through Japanese straits have collectively generated precisely the domestic political conditions in Japan that make sustained defense investment and explicit Taiwan commitments politically viable rather than politically dangerous. In other words, China's own pressure campaign contributed directly to creating the Japanese security posture that now presents Beijing with its most consequential regional deterrence problem. The Type 03 batteries scheduled for Yonaguni in 2030 will look out across 110 kilometers of open water toward Taiwan. Behind them will stand a Japan that has spent years building the legal frameworks, command structures, allied relationships, weapons inventories to give that commitment operational meaning.